Alice gripped the handle of her only umbrella. This was reckless, absolutely reckless. 2 hours ago, she'd received the final eviction notice slipped under her dorm door. 30 minutes ago, the dean's office had sent an email. If she didn't pay her tuition by midnight tomorrow, she'd be withdrawn from the university. Now, this worn, clear umbrella with the faded school logo was the only thing keeping her dry as she walked home through the storm. But the man huddled against the lamppost in front of her was shaking violently, his expensive white shirt plastered to his skin, rain streaming down his face and over the dark serpent tattoo that coiled up his neck. Nobody else had stopped. Not a single person in this indifferent city had even glanced his way. She couldn't just walk past him and pretend she hadn't seen his suffering. So she held the umbrella over his head, all of it. The rain immediately soaked through her denim jacket as she crouched down, pressing her last $5 into his trembling hand for the coffee shop across the street. He looked up at her, his eyes wide with something between shock and disbelief, his mouth opening as if to speak. But no words came, only the sound of rain hammering the pavement and the distant wail of sirens. Alice left the umbrella propped against the post beside him and began the long walk back to campus, water running down her braids, her backpack growing heavier with each step as she tried to figure out how she would survive tomorrow. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. Alice's phone buzzed at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had already tried to destroy her 3 times over. The email from the bursar's office didn't waste words. Final notice. Payment required by 11:59 p.m. Wednesday, or enrollment will be terminated. She stared at the screen in the library's dim corner, her fingers frozen over the keyboard of her half-written chemistry paper. $23,000. She had $317 in her account, money she'd scraped together from her campus job, shelving books and the weekend shifts at the diner that left her hands smelling like grease, no matter how many times she washed them. The rain started as she packed her backpack, fat drops splattering against the library windows like accusations. By the time she pushed through the doors, it was a deluge. The kind of storm that turned the world gray and made the streetlights flicker on early. She clutched her clear umbrella, the cheap one she'd bought freshman year with the university logo peeling off the handle, and started the 20-minute walk back to her dorm. Each step was a calculation. If she got withdrawn, she'd have to tell her mother, who worked 2 jobs and still sent Alice $50 every month she couldn't afford to send. Her mother, who told everyone at church that her daughter was going to be the first doctor in the family. The campus thinned out as she walked, students sprinting past her toward warm buildings and dining halls. The rain came harder, turning the sidewalk into a river. That's when she saw him. He was slumped against a lamppost on the edge of campus, where the manicured university grounds gave way to the rougher city streets. At first, she thought he might be drunk, another student who'd started the party too early. But as she got closer, she saw the way his white dress shirt clung to his torso, dark with water, and something else, something darker spreading from his side. His head was tilted back against the metal pole, rain streaming down his face, over the intricate black tattoo that wound up his neck and onto his cheek, like a serpent. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow. People walked past him. A woman in a business suit stepped around him without breaking stride. 2 men in construction gear glanced at him and kept moving. In this city, you learned not to see certain things. You learned that survival meant keeping your head down and your problems to yourself. Alice stopped 3 feet away from him. Her nursing prerequisites kicked in automatically. She clocked his pallor, the tremor in his hands, the way his lips had gone pale. Shock, maybe. Blood loss, definitely. She should call 911. She should keep walking. She had her own crisis to manage, her own impossible deadline bearing down on her. Instead, she stepped closer and held her umbrella over his head. His eyes opened, dark, glassy with pain, but sharp underneath. For a moment they just stared at each other, him crumpled on the ground in his expensive ruined shirt, and her standing in her worn denim jacket with her second-hand backpack cutting into her shoulders. The rain hammered the umbrella above them, creating a small, fragile shelter. "Hey," she said softly, "you need help." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Up close, she could see the stab wound in his side, still seeping. This man needed a hospital, not a scholarship student with $300 and a caffeine addiction. But when she glanced around, the street was empty. Everyone else had decided he wasn't their problem. Alice made a decision that would change everything. She took the $5 bill from her pocket, money she'd earmarked for dinner, and pressed it into his trembling hand. "There's a coffee shop across the street," she said, even though she knew he probably couldn't make it that far. "Get something warm, and please, call someone." She propped the umbrella against the lamppost beside him, angling it to keep most of the rain off his body. Their eyes met one more time. His expression had shifted into something between shock and disbelief, like he'd forgotten people could be kind. Like he'd forgotten kindness existed at all. Then Alice turned and walked away, leaving her only umbrella behind. The rain soaked through her jacket in seconds, plastered her braids to her neck, turned her jeans heavy and cold. Water filled her shoes. She shivered violently, her backpack growing heavier with each step. But she didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she might see him collapse completely, and then she'd have to stay, and she'd never make it to her dorm to figure out how to pull a miracle out of thin air before midnight tomorrow. The walk took 35 minutes instead of 20. By the time she reached her dorm, her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely unlock the door. Alice woke up Wednesday morning with a fever that made her head feel like it was full of cotton, and her throat like she'd swallowed broken glass. She lay in bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of somewhere better, and tried to remember why she needed to get up. Then it hit her. 11 hours until they withdrew her from school. She dragged herself to her desk and logged into her student account. The balance hadn't changed. She'd spent the night emailing the financial aid office, the dean of students, even her academic advisor, begging for an extension, a payment plan, anything. No responses yet. Her phone showed 2 missed calls from her mother that she couldn't bring herself to return. The morning passed in a haze. She went to her chemistry lecture because missing it would mean failing the midterm next week, which wouldn't matter if she got withdrawn, but felt like it should matter anyway. She sat in the back row in her still damp jacket, trying not to cough, trying not to think about the man in the rain. Was he okay? Had anyone found him? She should have stayed. She should have called 911 herself instead of leaving him with $5 and a cheap umbrella. After class, there was an email waiting for her. Not from financial aid. From Dean Whitmore's office. Please report to Administration Building, room 301, immediately. The dean's secretary didn't meet her eyes when Alice walked in, which told her everything she needed to know. She was shown into Whitmore's office, all dark wood and leather chairs and diplomas on the wall that probably cost more than Alice's entire education. Dean Whitmore looked up from his computer with the kind of smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Miss Chen, have a seat." Alice sat, her wet backpack leaving a puddle on his expensive carpet. "I'll get straight to the point," Whitmore said, folding his hands on his desk. "Your account shows an outstanding balance of $23,400. That payment was due yesterday." "I know, sir. I'm working on—" "We've been extraordinarily patient with you." His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that delivered bad news for a living. "But the university has policies. We can't make exceptions no matter how unfortunate your circumstances." Alice's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that she'd worked 30 hours a week on top of a full course load, that she'd tutored other students for $10 an hour, that she donated plasma twice a week until she got anemic, that she'd given her last $5 to a dying stranger in the rain because apparently she was an idiot who couldn't save herself, let alone anyone else. Instead, she said, "I understand. Your campus housing will need to be vacated by Friday," Whitmore continued, already looking back at his computer screen. "We'll send the withdrawal paperwork to your student email. I'm sorry it came to this." He wasn't sorry. Alice could see it in the way he'd already dismissed her, in the way his fingers were poised over his keyboard, ready to move on to the next problem student who didn't have rich parents to solve things with a phone call. She stood up, even though her legs felt shaky. "Thank you for your time." Walking out of that office felt like walking out of her entire future. The hallway seemed longer than it should have been, the walls pressing in. Other students passed her, laughing, texting, complaining about midterms they'd actually get to take. None of them saw her. She'd spent 3 years at this university, and she'd been invisible the whole time. The girl who worked in the library, the girl who studied in the corner, the girl who was about to disappear completely. She made it outside before the tears came. The rain had stopped, leaving everything slick and gray. She sat on the library steps with her head in her hands, trying to figure out her next move. Call her mom, pack her things, find somewhere to live, find a job that would actually pay enough to matter. Start over somehow, somewhere else. The sound started low, a rumble that Alice felt in her chest before she heard it. She looked up and saw them coming down the main campus drive, 5 matte black armored sedans moving in formation like a funeral procession. Students stopped walking. Conversations died mid-sentence. The cars rolled to a stop in front of the library, engines still running, and Alice felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't normal. This was the kind of thing you saw in movies, not on a Wednesday morning at a state university. The doors opened in unison. Men in black suits emerged, 20 of them at least, moving with military precision. They formed 2 lines, creating a corridor between the cars and the library steps. Everything had gone quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing. The driver of the lead sedan came around and opened the back door. Out stepped a man who looked like he'd walked out of a different world entirely. Dark suit, perfectly tailored, hair swept back. And when he turned, Alice saw it. The serpent tattoo winding up his neck onto his cheek, stark against his skin even in the gray morning light. Their eyes met across 30 feet of pavement, and Alice felt the world tilt. It was him, the man from the rain. Except he wasn't broken anymore, wasn't bleeding and shivering and half-conscious. He looked like power personified, like danger wrapped in expensive fabric, like someone who could make problems disappear with a nod of his head. He started walking toward her, his men staying in formation behind him. Every student on the quad had their phone out now, filming, whispering, backing away. Security guards appeared at the edge of the scene but made no move to intervene. Even they could sense that this was something beyond their jurisdiction. Alice couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't understand what was happening. He climbed the library steps until he was standing directly in front of her. Up close, she could see that his eyes weren't cold at all. They were burning with something intense and focused entirely on her. He reached into his jacket, and Alice's heart stopped, but what he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was her umbrella, clean, dry. The peeling university logo somehow restored, like it had been professionally refurbished. He held it out to her, and when he spoke, his voice was low and accented, each word deliberate. "You forgot this." Alice took it on autopilot, her fingers closing around the familiar curved handle. I didn't forget it. I left it for you." Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or recognition. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm returning it." "Who are you?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "My name is Kim Jae-yong." He said it like she should know what that meant. From the way everyone around them had gone dead silent, maybe she should. "And you saved my life last night. That's not a debt I take lightly." I just gave you an umbrella and $5. You gave me more than that." His eyes hadn't left hers. "You stopped when everyone else walked by. You saw me when I was invisible." The irony wasn't lost on Alice. She'd just been thinking about how invisible she was, and now she had every eye on campus locked on her. And it felt worse somehow. "I don't need anything," she said, which was possibly the biggest lie she'd ever told. "I'm glad you're okay, but have lunch with me." It wasn't really a question. "I can't. I have—" What did she have? A dorm room she'd be evicted from in 2 days? A future that had just collapsed? "I have class." "After class, then." He gestured to the cars behind him. "My driver will wait." "That's not necessary." "Please." The word seemed to cost him something, like he wasn't used to asking. 1 hour. That's all I'm requesting." Alice looked past him at the crowd that had gathered. Hundreds of students watching, recording, spreading this across social media in real time. She thought about Dean Whitmore in his office, probably watching from his window. She thought about how she had nothing left to lose. "Okay," she said. 1 hour. The smile that crossed Jae-yong's face was small but genuine, transforming him from intimidating to almost human. "I'll be here at noon." He turned and walked back to his car, his men falling in behind him. The sedans pulled away in perfect formation, leaving Alice standing on the library steps with her restored umbrella and the weight of 500 stairs. Her phone buzzed with texts from numbers she didn't recognize. The murmur started immediately. "Who is she? Did you see those cars? That guy looked like he could kill someone." Alice clutched her umbrella and pushed through the crowd, ignoring the questions, the cameras, the sudden attention from people who'd never noticed her before. She made it to the bathroom in the science building before her hands started shaking. What had she just agreed to? Who was Kim Jae-yong, really? And why did the way he'd looked at her make her feel like she'd just stepped off the edge of something with no idea how far she'd fall? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from the bursar's office. "Dear Miss Chen, your account has been paid in full. Current balance, 0.0." Alice read it 3 times. Then she sat down on the bathroom floor and stared at the wall, her umbrella clutched in her lap, and tried to understand what she'd gotten herself into. At noon, she was waiting on the library steps. She'd changed into her one good sweater, the navy one without any holes, and pulled her braids into a neat bun. Her fever had broken, but her head still felt fuzzy. Reality still felt slippery. The bursar's office had confirmed it. Someone had paid $23,000 into her account at 9:47 a.m. They wouldn't say who. They didn't need to. The black sedan arrived exactly on time. The driver, a man built like a wall with a scar through his eyebrow, opened the door for her without a word. Alice slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe and found Jae-young waiting, looking somehow both relaxed and coiled tight, like a predator pretending to be tame. "Thank you for coming," he said, as the car pulled away from campus. "Did you pay my tuition?" Alice didn't see the point in small talk. "Yes." "Why?" "You gave me your umbrella in the rain." He said it like that explained everything. "That doesn't make sense. An umbrella costs $15. You paid $23,000. You gave me your only umbrella," he corrected, "while you were already struggling, while you had nothing to spare. That kind of sacrifice is worth more than you know." Alice's hands twisted in her lap. "I can't accept this." "You already have. The payment is irreversible." "Then I'll pay you back." "With what?" His voice wasn't cruel, just factual. "It would take you years, decades maybe, and I don't need your money, Alice." The sound of her name in his mouth made something flutter in her chest. "How do you even know my name?" He gestured to the umbrella she'd brought with her. "The university logo. It took my people 4 hours to track you down through the registrar's office. You're Alice Chen, 20 years old, biochemistry major, 3.9 GPA despite working 32 hours a week. You're brilliant. You shouldn't have to struggle the way you have been. You investigated me." She should have been angry. She should have been scared. Instead, she just felt tired. "I needed to know who to thank." The car turned into the parking lot of a restaurant Alice had walked past 100 times but never entered, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list. And who to protect? Protect from what? Jae-young's expression darkened. "From the people who tried to kill me last night. From the enemies I've made. From anyone who might see you as a way to hurt me." He leaned forward slightly. "Alice, when you helped me, you became visible to a world that notices these things. I can't undo that, but I can make sure you're safe." "Who are you?" she asked again, though this time she thought she might not want the answer. "I run certain operations in this city. Import, export, property management, security." Each word was carefully chosen, revealing nothing. "Some of my business partners aren't pleased with recent territory negotiations. Last night was their way of expressing that displeasure. You're a criminal." It should have sounded like an accusation, but it came out flat. "I'm a businessman who operates in gray areas." His eyes held hers. "I won't lie to you, Alice. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've hurt people who tried to hurt me first. But I have a code. I protect the people under my protection, and I pay my debts. You're both now." The driver opened her door. They were at the restaurant, and through the windows Alice could see white tablecloths and crystal glasses. Another world entirely. "I don't want to be protected," she said. "I just want to finish school and live my life." "Then finish school. Live your life. I won't interfere unless you need me to." He stepped out of the car and offered his hand. "But have lunch with me first. Let me explain. And if you still want to walk away after, I'll respect that." Alice looked at his extended hand, the manicured nails, the expensive watch, the faint scars across his knuckles that told stories he probably wouldn't share. She thought about her empty bank account that wasn't empty anymore, about the future that had seemed impossible this morning and now stretched out ahead of her again. She thought about the man shivering in the rain and the way he'd looked at her like she'd performed a miracle by simply stopping. She took his hand. The lunch had stretched into 3 hours. Jae-young had been surprisingly easy to talk to once the initial tension broke, asking about her classes, her research interests, carefully avoiding questions about her family that might make her uncomfortable. He told her about growing up in Seoul, about coming to the city at 16 with nothing, about building something from the ground up. He'd left out the parts about what exactly he'd built, but Alice could read between the lines. The next 2 weeks settled into an uneasy rhythm. Alice went to her classes, studied in the library, tried to pretend everything was normal. But normal had shattered the moment those 5 cars pulled up to campus. Students who'd never spoken to her before suddenly wanted to be her friend, or kept their distance like she carried a contagious disease. Professors looked at her differently. Even the barista at the campus coffee shop started giving her free upgrades she didn't ask for. And Jae-young kept appearing. Not intrusively, not exactly. But she'd leave the library and find his car waiting. She'd walk to her dorm and see one of his men stationed casually across the street. Once she'd stayed late in the chemistry lab, and when she finally emerged at 11 p.m., there he was, leaning against the building with 2 cups of coffee. "You shouldn't be out this late alone," he'd said, handing her one. "I've been doing it for 3 years. "You weren't visible 3 years ago." His eyes scanned the dark campus. "You are now." It should have felt suffocating, but there was something almost endearing about how seriously he took protection. The dangerous mafia boss who didn't understand why she insisted on walking everywhere instead of accepting his driver, who looked genuinely confused when she explained she couldn't just skip class because he wanted to take her to lunch, who watched her study with an intensity that made her lose her place in her textbook more than once. "You're staring," she'd said one evening in the campus coffee shop, where he'd somehow ended up sitting across from her. "You're fascinating." He'd said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. "Most people take what they can get. You gave away what you had. Most people aren't desperate enough to need an umbrella that badly. I wasn't talking about me." The way he looked at her made her chest feel tight, like he saw something in her she didn't see in herself. Like he'd decided she was worth protecting, and nothing in the world could change his mind. 3 weeks after the umbrella incident, Alice got a text at midnight. "Don't come to the library tomorrow. Stay on campus, please." She'd ignored it and gone anyway. Her biochemistry midterm was in 2 days, and she needed the reference books. But when she arrived at 9 p.m., the parking lot was nearly empty, and she had the 3rd floor almost to herself. At 10:30, her phone buzzed. "Jae-young, where are you?" She ignored it and kept studying. At 11, she heard voices, angry, escalating, then glass breaking on a lower floor. Her hand reached for her phone, but before she could dial, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in dim red. Alice grabbed her bag and moved toward the stairs, her heart hammering. She'd made it halfway down when she heard the sound that would haunt her nightmares. A gunshot, muffled but unmistakable, somewhere on the 1st floor. She froze. Then footsteps, running, multiple sets, voices shouting in Korean. Another shot. Alice pressed herself against the wall in the stairwell, her hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing. The emergency exit was 1 floor down. If she could just make it. The door below her burst open. Men in dark clothes, one of them bleeding from his shoulder. Jae-young's men, she realized with a shock. She recognized the driver with the scarred eyebrow. They were retreating, which meant they were losing. Then she saw him. Jae-young stumbled through the door, supported by another man. His white shirt, always white, she thought distantly, was torn and soaked with blood from a wound in his side. not the same side as the stab wound from the rain, but close enough that Alice's nursing training kicked in automatically. That much blood, that location. He needed a hospital. "Get him to the car," Scarred Eyebrow was saying. "We'll hold them here." "Move," Jae Yong growled, his voice strained with pain but still commanding. "All of you, move. They want me, not you." "Sir, that's an order." They were going to make a stand here, Alice realized. They were going to fight, and some of them were going to die, and it was happening in her library over territory disputes she didn't understand in a world she'd stumbled into by accident. She made a decision. "This way," her voice cut through the argument. All of them turned, hands going to weapons before they recognized her. "There's a service entrance in the basement. It leads to the maintenance tunnels under campus." Jae Yong's eyes found hers in the red emergency lighting. "Alice, get out of here. Now. Shut up and follow me unless you want to bleed out in a stairwell." She didn't wait for an answer, just took off down the stairs. Behind her, she heard Scarred Eyebrow say something in rapid Korean, and then footsteps following. She led them down to the basement, a place she knew from her work-study job shelving books, through the maze of storage rooms to a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." It led to the steam tunnels, hot and narrow and smelling like old pipes, perfect for losing pursuers. They emerged 10 minutes later near the science building, and Scarred Eyebrow had his phone out, calling for extraction. Jae Yong had stayed silent the whole time, one hand pressed to his side, his face pale but composed. The car arrived within minutes. They piled in, and only then did Jae Yong speak. "Take her home." "You need a hospital," Alice said. "I need you safe." His voice was weakening. "That's more important." "Don't be stupid. You're losing too much blood." "Alice, where are you going?" She looked at Scarred Eyebrow in the driver's seat. "Tell me where you're taking him." The driver glanced at Jae Yong, who closed his eyes briefly. "Tell her." They went to a building on the east side of the city that looked like a legitimate medical office but was clearly something else. Clean, well-equipped, but staffed by people who didn't ask questions. Alice stayed while they stitched him up. 12 stitches in his side, another 8 in his shoulder. She watched the doctor work with professional efficiency, and she watched Jae Yong's face, the way he didn't make a sound even though she knew it had to hurt. When they were alone in the recovery room, minimalist furniture, medical equipment, and a single chair where Alice had planted herself, he finally spoke. "You should have run. You should have gone to a real hospital." "Can't. Too many questions." He shifted on the bed, wincing. "How did you know about those tunnels?" "I worked in the library for 2 years. You learn things." She leaned forward. "What happened tonight?" "A disagreement about territory." His voice was flat. "It's been building for weeks." "The people who stabbed you in the rain?" "They're friends." He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "I told you that helping me would make you visible. Tonight proved I was right." "If they'd found you in that library," "But they didn't. Because you knew an escape route I didn't. Because you saved me again." He shook his head slowly. "You keep saving me, Alice. That's not how this is supposed to work." Alice stood and moved closer to the bed. This close, she could see the full extent of his tattoo. The dragon that wound up his neck really did continue onto his cheek, its scales intricate, its eyes fierce. She'd been curious about it since that first night in the rain. "What does it mean?" she asked. "The tattoo." Jae Yong's hand moved to his neck unconsciously. "In my world, it marks me. Shows my rank, my allegiance. I got it when I was 19, right after I..." He trailed off, right after I proved I could do what needed to be done. And what was that? Something I'm not proud of. His eyes met hers. But something that kept me alive. That's the trade-off in my world. You do terrible things, or terrible things are done to you. There's no middle ground. That's bleak. That's reality. He reached out, his fingers brushing her hand where it rested on the bed. Your reality is different. You study and work and help strangers in the rain because you believe people are fundamentally good. My reality is that most people will hurt you if it benefits them. We're from different worlds, Alice. And yet here we are. Here we are, he agreed softly, his fingers intertwined with hers, warm despite the blood loss. I should send you away, push you back into your world where you're safe. Can you? No. The admission seemed to cost him. Not anymore. Alice sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle his injuries. Then stop trying. The kiss happened slowly, carefully, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. He tasted like copper and antiseptic, and something underneath that was just him. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "This is dangerous," he whispered. "I know. I can't protect you if you're close to me. You become a target. You didn't protect me tonight. I protected you." A smile ghosted across his lips. Fair point. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, existing in a space between his world and hers. Then Alice pulled back. "I should let you rest. Stay." His hand tightened on hers, just for a while. So she stayed, sitting in the chair beside his bed while he drifted into an uneasy sleep. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, the way his face relaxed when unconsciousness took him somewhere his responsibilities couldn't follow. She thought about different worlds colliding, about umbrellas in the rain, about the choice she'd made weeks ago that had led her here. She was still there when dawn broke through the windows, painting everything gold. The library incident should have been the end of it. Should have been Alice's wake-up call to walk away before things got worse. Instead, she found herself drawn deeper into Jae-Yong's orbit, and he into hers. He started attending her study sessions, sitting quietly with his laptop while she worked through problem sets. She started joining him for late dinners at restaurants where the staff knew him by name and never brought a check. They existed in a strange bubble where the danger felt distant and the future felt possible. It lasted exactly 11 days. Alice was in the library, different library this time, the one attached to the science building where she felt safer, when the man sat down across from her. Young, maybe mid-20s, with a snake tattooed on his wrist and eyes that reminded her of broken glass. "Alice Chen," he said pleasantly. "May I join you?" Every instinct screamed danger. "I'm studying." "This won't take long." He leaned back, casual, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I have a message for you from my employer." "I don't want your message." "He wants you to know that Kim Jae-Yong's protection won't last forever. Territory changes hands, power shifts, and when it does..." He reached across the table, not touching her but close enough that she could smell cigarettes on his clothes. Pretty girls caught in the middle tend to get hurt. Alice's hands had gone numb. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you." He stood up, still smiling that dead smile. "Choose your friends carefully, Alice. Some friendships cost more than they're worth." He walked away, disappearing into the stacks, leaving Alice frozen at her table with her chemistry textbook open to a page she could no longer read. Her phone was in her hand before she'd consciously decided to call. Jae Yong answered on the first ring. Alice. Someone just threatened me. In the library, a man with a snake tattoo. Silence. Then very quietly. Did he touch you? No. He said your protection won't last and that I should choose my friends carefully. Where are you? Science library, 3rd floor. Don't move. I'm sending someone. Jae Yong. But he'd already hung up. Alice sat there, staring at her books, feeling the walls of her safe academic world crumble completely. This wasn't romantic anymore. This wasn't some exciting, dangerous liaison. This was real, and she was a liability, and someone was going to get hurt. Scarred Eyebrow arrived within 10 minutes, polite but insistent. He drove her to Jae Yong's office, a building downtown she'd never been to, all glass and steel and money. Jae Yong was waiting in a conference room, and the moment he saw her face, his expression went dark. Tell me exactly what he said. She recounted the conversation, watching his jaw tighten with every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. The Viper, he finally said. One of my rivals. He's been pushing into my territory for months. Why did he threaten me? Because he knows. Jae Yong's hands were flat on the table, his knuckles white. He knows that hurting you would hurt me worse than any business loss. Then this has to stop. Alice's voice came out stronger than she felt. Whatever this is between us, it has to end. I'm not worth starting a war over. That's not your decision to make. It absolutely is. She stood up. I didn't sign up for this. I gave you an umbrella. That doesn't mean I want to be caught in the middle of your gang war. Alice. No. She was shaking now, adrenaline and fear catching up. Stay away from me. Stop following me. Stop protecting me. Stop whatever this is. I want out. I can't do that. He stood too, moving around the table. You're already in. Walking away doesn't make you safe. It makes you vulnerable. Then I'll be vulnerable. That's better than being your weakness. She left before he could argue, taking the elevator down to the lobby, walking out into the afternoon sun. She made it 3 blocks before the tears came, hot and furious. Not because she didn't care about him. That was the problem. She cared too much, and caring too much in his world got people killed. Her phone buzzed constantly over the next 2 days, texts from Jae Yong that she didn't answer, calls she let go to voicemail. She threw herself into studying, into the comforting logic of chemical bonds and molecular structures. She avoided her usual spots on campus, varied her routine, pretended she could disappear back into invisibility. Then on Thursday evening she got an email from Dean Whitmore. Please report to my office immediately. Urgent matter regarding your academic standing. Alice's stomach dropped. The tuition was paid. She'd checked 3 times. Unless they were rejecting the payment somehow, claiming it was illegitimate money, unless Jae Yong's world was contaminating hers in ways she hadn't anticipated. She went to the administration building, climbed to the 3rd floor, knocked on Whitmore's door. His secretary wasn't at her desk. Odd, this late in the evening. Come in, Whitmore's voice called. Alice pushed open the door and stopped dead. Whitmore was behind his desk, hands raised slightly, his face pale. Standing next to him, gun held casually but firmly, was the man from the library. Snake tattoo. And behind him, sitting in the leather chair like he owned the place, was someone else. Older, maybe 40, with silver streaking his hair and eyes like chips of ice. Alice Chen. The older man's voice was smooth, cultured. Thank you for coming. Please close the door. She should run, should scream, should do anything except what she did, which was step inside and let the door swing shut behind her. "Allow me to introduce myself," the man continued. "I am called the Viper, and you, my dear, are going to help me send a message to Kim Jae-yong." Everything after that happened very fast. Snake Tattoo grabbed her and she fought, landed an elbow in his ribs that made him grunt. But then there was a cloth over her face, chemical sweet, and the world went gray around the edges. The last thing she saw was Dean Whitmore's terrified face. And the last thing she thought was that Jae-yong had been right all along. Walking away didn't make her safe. It made her vulnerable. Alice woke up in darkness with her head pounding and her hands zip-tied behind her back. She was sitting on a cold floor, concrete under her, and when she tried to move, pain shot through her shoulders. She'd been here a while then, long enough for her muscles to stiffen. Memory flooded back. The Viper, the office, the cloth over her face. "She's awake," Snake Tattoo's voice somewhere to her left. Lights came on, harsh fluorescence that made her squint. She was in some kind of warehouse or storage facility, empty except for the chair they'd dragged her to. The Viper sat across from her, perfectly composed, like kidnapping college students was just another Tuesday. "My apologies for the theatrics," he said, "but Kim Jae-yong has been difficult to negotiate with. He needs proper motivation." "He'll kill you for this." Alice's voice came out hoarse. "Perhaps, but first, he'll give me what I want." The Viper pulled out his phone. The Eastern Territories, his shipping routes, and his contacts in Seoul. A fair trade for one girl, don't you think? "You don't know him at all." "On the contrary, I know him very well. I know he's built his empire on calculated risk and cold logic. I know he's never let emotion compromise a deal." The Viper smiled. "Until you. You're his one irrational choice, the crack in his armor." Alice's mind raced. She needed to buy time, needed to think. "What about the Dean? Is he one of yours?" "Dean Whitmore?" The Viper laughed. "A useful idiot. He's been laundering money for me through the university's scholarship fund for 2 years. When I needed someone to deliver you to me, he was the obvious choice, though I suspect his usefulness has reached its end," which meant Whitmore was probably dead. Alice's stomach turned. "Kim Jae-yong will be here within the hour," the Viper continued, "and when he arrives, we'll have our conversation. One way or another, this ends tonight." He stood and walked away, leaving Snake Tattoo to watch her. Alice tested the zip ties. Tight, professional. Her feet weren't bound, though, which was sloppy. And Snake Tattoo was alone with her, which was sloppy, too. The Viper was arrogant, which meant he made mistakes. Alice took inventory of her surroundings. The warehouse was huge, mostly empty. She could see light through high windows. They were near the university, she realized. She could see the top of the science building. They'd taken her somewhere close, which meant her eyes landed on something across the room. Chemical barrels, stacked near what looked like a loading bay. This building was attached to the university's central heating plant. She'd walked past it 100 times, which meant she knew exactly where she was, and more importantly, she knew what was in those barrels. "I need to use the bathroom," she said. Snake Tattoo didn't even look at her. "Hold it. I've been unconscious for hours. I'm going to piss myself." "Not my problem." Alice shifted, making the chair scrape. "Fine. But when your boss gets back and finds his hostage sitting in her own urine, don't blame me for ruining his dramatic moment." Snake Tattoo sighed and stood up. "You've got 2 minutes." He cut the zip ties and hauled her to her feet. Her legs nearly buckled. She'd been sitting too long. He pointed to a door in the corner marked restroom and positioned himself outside. Alice went in, locked the door, and immediately looked up. No windows, but there was a vent. Too small to crawl through, but big enough for what she needed. She grabbed the metal trash can, stood on it, and examined the vent cover. 4 screws. She used her student ID card to unscrew them. It took 90 seconds, and she cut her hand twice, but they came loose. The vent opened into the building's central air system, which meant it connected to the heating plant. Which meant her plan might actually work if she could just... "Time's up!" Snake Tattoo pounded on the door. Alice flushed the toilet, ran water in the sink, and opened the door. He grabbed her arm, dragged her back to the chair, secured her with new zip ties. But he hadn't noticed the vent cover sitting loosely in place, or the way Alice was now paying very close attention to the building's architecture. 30 minutes later, the warehouse door crashed open. Jae-young walked in alone, and he looked like death itself. His face was a mask of cold fury, his suit impeccable, his hands loose at his sides in the way of someone who knew exactly how much damage they could do. The Viper's men, there were 6 of them now, materialized from the shadows, all shifted nervously. Kim Jae-young, the Viper stood. "So glad you could join us." "Let her go." Jae-young's voice was flat, empty of everything except promise of violence. "Of course. Once we've concluded our business," the Viper gestured expansively. "The Eastern Territories. I want the docks, the warehouses, and all associated contracts. Sign them over, and she walks out with you." "And if I refuse?" The Viper nodded to Snake Tattoo, who pulled out a knife and held it to Alice's throat. She felt the cold metal against her skin and forced herself to stay very, very still. Jae-young's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went dead. "I'll sign. Show me the papers." "No," Alice shouted. "Don't give him anything. I'm not worth it." "Be quiet," Jae-young said, still not looking at her. "This doesn't concern you." "It absolutely—" "I said quiet." This time he did look at her, and what she saw in his face made her stop. Not anger, not fear, but calculation. He was planning something. The Viper produced a folder. "Sign each page. My lawyers will verify the documents are legitimate." Jae-young took the pen, bent over the papers. His hand moved across the first page, then the second. Alice watched, her mind racing. This couldn't be happening. He couldn't give up his entire empire, for the lights went out. Every single light in the warehouse, in the heating plant, in the entire complex, went dark. And in that darkness, Alice heard Jae-young move, fast, trained, deadly, heard the wet sound of impact, someone's grunt of pain. Snake Tattoo's knife left her throat as he lunged toward the sound. Alice threw herself sideways off the chair, hit the ground rolling, and ran blind toward where she remembered the chemical barrels. She collided with them in the dark, felt along the top until she found the one labeled ethanol, flammable. She ripped off her hoodie, soaked one sleeve in the ethanol, grabbed the emergency lighter that was required by code to be attached to every barrel. Light bloomed from her makeshift torch. It revealed chaos. Jae-young was fighting 3 men at once, and he was winning. Snake Tattoo was on the ground, not moving. The Viper had a gun out, searching for a target. And then his eyes found Alice, standing by the barrels with fire in her hands. "Drop the gun, or I drop this," she said. "You know what ethanol does when it burns near heating equipment?" The Viper's eyes widened. "You wouldn't. You'd blow us all up. Try me." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jae-young broke the last man's arm with an audible crack, and the tide shifted. The Viper saw it, saw his plan collapsing, and made a choice. He raised his gun, not at Alice, but at Jae-young's back. Alice didn't think. She hurled the burning hoodie at the Viper. It hit him in the chest, and he screamed, Stumbling backward, Jae-yong spun, saw the gun, closed the distance in 3 strides, and disarmed the Viper with brutal efficiency. Then the sprinklers kicked in. Water rained down from the ceiling, triggered by the smoke from Alice's torch. It doused the flames, soaked everyone, turned the warehouse floor slippery. Jae-yong had the Viper on his knees, a gun pressed to his head, and his finger on the trigger. "Jae-yong, don't." Alice's voice cut through the chaos. "You kill him. You start a war." "He took you." Jae-yong's voice was shaking. "He put a knife to your throat. And we won. You won. Don't throw it away for revenge." Their eyes met across the warehouse, water streaming down both their faces. Alice saw him waver, saw the battle between his nature and his choice. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. "Get out," he said to the Viper. "Tell your people that this territory is closed. Tell them what happens to anyone who touches her again." The Viper scrambled to his feet and ran, his men following. Within seconds, the warehouse was empty except for Alice and Jae-yong, standing in the rain from the sprinklers, like they were back on that street corner where everything started. Jae-yong crossed to her, hands framing her face, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they—" "I'm fine." She was shaking now, adrenaline crashing. "You came alone. You were going to give up everything. It's just territory. It's just business." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "You're irreplaceable. You can't keep doing this, risking everything for you. I'll risk everything for you." He pulled her close, and she felt him trembling too. "I told you that first day. You made me visible. You saw me when I was nothing, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure no one hurts you for that kindness." Alice wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heart hammering against her chest. Outside, she could hear sirens, campus security, maybe police. They'd have to deal with that soon. Deal with explanations, consequences, the aftermath of tonight. But for now, in this moment, they just held each other under the artificial rain. 3 days later, the campus was still buzzing with rumors. A fight at the heating plant. Arrests made. Dean Whitmore found dead in his office. Suicide, they said, though everyone whispered about gang involvement. The Vipers organization had imploded. Turns out when your boss gets humiliated by a college student and a mafia boss, your people lose respect fast. Alice sat on the library steps where everything had started, watching students hurry past to class. Her hand was bandaged from the vent screws, and she had bruises on her wrists from the zip ties. But she was alive. She was free. And she was waiting. The car pulled up at noon exactly. Not the armored sedan this time, just a normal black car. Jae-yong got out, and Alice saw the careful way he moved. His ribs were still healing from the fight. He climbed the steps and sat down beside her. "You're late," she said. "I'm exactly on time. You're usually early. I'm trying to be less intense." He looked at her sideways. "How am I doing?" "Terribly." They sat in silence for a moment. A cool breeze blew across campus, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Storm clouds were building on the horizon. "I've made arrangements," Jae-yong said finally. "I'm legitimizing my operations. It'll take time, but within a year everything I do will be legal, documented, above board." Alice turned to look at him. "Why?" "Because you were right. You can't love someone who hurts people for a living. I don't want you to have to make that choice." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an umbrella. Not her old university one, but a new one. Sturdy, expensive, big enough for 2. "I also can't walk away from you. So I'm changing instead. That's not what I asked for. I know. but it's what you need." He stood and opened the umbrella as the first drops began to fall. "And you're what I need. So we'll figure it out." Alice stood too, stepping under the shelter he offered. The rain picked up, drumming against the fabric above them. Students scattered, running for buildings, but Alice and Jae Yong stayed right where they were. "You know this is insane," she said. "Your world, my world, they're not supposed to mix. And yet here we are." "Here we are," she echoed, remembering saying those exact words in a hospital room weeks ago. Jae Yong shifted the umbrella to one hand and used the other to tilt her chin up. "Last chance to walk away. Say the word and I disappear from your life. You go back to being invisible, safe, normal." Alice looked at him, this dangerous, complicated man who'd turned his whole world upside down because she'd given him an umbrella in the rain. This man who'd been willing to give up his empire to keep her safe. This man who was staring at her like she hung the moon. "I don't want normal," she said. "Normal is overrated." His smile was slow, genuine, transforming his face into something beautiful. "Yeah? Yeah." He kissed her then, right there on the library steps in the rain, under an umbrella big enough for two. Students walked by and stared, probably pulling out phones, definitely spreading more rumors. Alice didn't care. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let the whole campus know that the invisible girl had found something worth being seen for. When they broke apart, Jae Yong kept his arm around her, holding the umbrella steady. "So what now?" "Now?" Alice leaned into him. "Now I have a biochemistry exam to study for, and you have an empire to legitimize, and we figure out the rest as we go. Together, together." They started walking across campus, sharing the umbrella, matching their steps. The storm raged around them, but under their shelter they were warm and dry, and impossibly, inexplicably, together. Some kindnesses cost you nothing but change everything. Some debts can only be repaid with a lifetime. Some umbrellas are big enough for two people from different worlds who decide to share the rain. And sometimes, the girl who gave everything away learns that the right person will give it all back.